Managers can look for people to keep improving systems that already work, who notice inconsistencies that others miss, and who ask better questions. So even if those questions are not asked in as polished a fashion as we may like, because neurointense people sometimes tend to be a little bit blunt or things don't come out as fully polished or filtered, nurture them by inviting their analysis early in the process. Pair them with mentors who appreciate precision rather than perceive it as a threat.
Welcome to another episode of the I Will Aim podcast. Our topic for today is thinking differently. How critical thinker can thrive at work. Critical thinker often sees pattern others miss. Yet in many workplaces, they can feel misunderstood or out of place. In this insightful conversation, Dr. Blythe Cleverly, a brain expert, joined me to explore how analytical mind can not only fit but truly flourish. Together, she'll share practical tools and neuroscience based insight to help leaders, consultant, and employee harness the power of critical thinking for success and innovation. Welcome, Dr. Cleverly. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much, Will. I'm very happy to be here. How are you?
Good. Looking forward to our conversation. How about if we kick it off with a quick introduction?
Sure. It's really nice to talk to somebody who's a fellow corporate consultant who is results driven. And I help many critical thinkers who are at a fork in the road in their lives. And some of those people are in management, influence, celebrity, and authority. And now others are individual contributors. But all of them are at the top of their field because they've got this really driven brain type. So I'm going to focus today on where our businesses intersect, and that is with helping those brilliant analytical people to navigate change. And so these are the ones that have the institutional knowledge, but sometimes they're out of sync with others. Now, while your company will coaches on leadership, my work focuses more on the brain side of that experience, and I help people understand how their cognitive wiring, if you will, may be different and help translate between brain types so that people can collaborate and communicate instead of having fragmentation or losing their top talent. So I guess we both close the gaps that companies are dealing with concerning culture and team dynamics.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Let me ask you the first question. From a brain science perspective, what makes critical thinker process information and approach problem differently than others?
Well, critical thinkers are what I call neurointense. They have minds that are wired for depth, problem solving, and pattern recognition. These thinkers process information quickly and they ask more questions because their prefrontal cortex, the brain's planning and logic center, is highly active. And they can be seen as challenging and perfectionistic because their cingulate gyrus also stays switched on. And that keeps them on high alert to any errors or any consistencies that they see. So it's not just about intelligence, it's a processing style. Their minds are constantly scanning, sorting, connecting dots that other people miss. And that's what makes them brilliant at complex work. But it can also make it harder to switch off or to read the room. And so the parts of the brain that handle the social and emotional cues, like the temporal and prefrontal regions, they don't always keep up with how fast their logic runs. So they can feel out of sync with other people.
Thank you for highlighting, what makes them different. And one of the things you mentioned that I want to kind of deep dive a little bit is sometimes critical thinkers struggle to fit in workplace because they challenge assumption. And how can organization embrace that opportunity and look at that as a strength rather than an act of defiance?
Well, questioning is innovation in disguise. So companies that thrive, they don't silence critical thinkers. They structure curiosity. And that means creating psychological safety for why questions and reframing them as due diligence, not disruption. So the first step is to understand that it's not a personal affront to anyone. It is an actual need of this brain type to question things. And companies could provide time for Q&A at the end of meetings, or even better, a suggestion I've made in the past is that they could encourage written feedback, which doesn't require these people who are often introverts to question aloud in a public setting and be seen as difficult. So then acknowledge that feedback later when you get it without taking any offense, so that the analytical employee feels trusted rather than troublesome.
I love the fact that you mentioned psychological safety, which is a critical element for an organization to be successful. What you
Hmm.
mentioned around how to help them embracing asking question, and also give them an option to write in their question, and more importantly, as you mentioned, allowing them to write their question is one aspect of it, but acknowledging it later on is immensely powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
As consultants, we often see brilliant minds frustrated with what they call opus politics, right? That's what they call it. What strategy can we do? Can we employ or implement to help critical thinker engage effectively?
Hmm.
There are assets.
Well, they're going to be much more engaged if they focus on what is moving ahead for them. Now, these people get frustrated because they have problem solving brains and they want efficiency. That's really important. So it's an aha or an eureka moment, as you say, when they discover the scope of where their influence lies versus that of others. So important to realize that things are not simple with political dynamics in corporate. So we're not solving problems in a vacuum. Implementation affects everyone, and there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be considered and needs to consider and approve things before moving forward. So, this brain type really likes control. So, what are they in control of? And we help them to steer their processing power towards that and to see a bigger picture instead of being hijacked by their frustration.
I like the fact that you mentioned we help them. As an organization, we have the opportunity or ability to pivot and to make an environment more suitable for them to thrive. And I love the fact that you used the keyword we help them.
Mhm.
What's the role of emotional intelligence? We people talk about emotional intelligence more and more now these days. What's the role of emotional intelligence in helping critical thinker get their idea or communicate their idea across?
That's a great question. EQ, it plays a big role for this brain type, but traditional EQ alone doesn't cut it. So that's why I focus on what I call the CMQ, which is a cognitive mastery quotient. That's something I coined, and that sits upstream of emotional regulation. Basically, before we can manage emotions, we have to master cognition. So that's our interpretations, our mental filters. And thinkers need to learn to pause and observe their processing first. And once they learn to regulate, they can respond better emotionally. Yes, they need to learn skills around both EQ and SQ, which is the social quotient. And you and I both talked about this previously, how many top performers are really brilliant in their field, and they might have the thought that that's enough. Well, I'm just really good at my job, and that's all that I need to do is be really good at what I do, but that's not the case.
Yes.
So they need also to be good with people. And if they want to stay and if they want to move upwards, they need to learn that. So reframing how they view themselves and others is mandatory.
Can we kind of deep dive a little bit of this concept of CMQ? Can you share with my audience what CMQ is, and maybe high level what are the key components of CMQ? Because that's something you created.
It's something that I've created. It's an assessment that's in the works that is helping people to understand what their CMQ is. However, what it comprises of is understanding the way that they think and what needs to be reframed in the way that they think. So there's many components to that. Reframing is a huge component of it. And they tend to see the world in black and white, and they have a lot of meta model violations, we call them, ways of thinking that are traps. And we need to get them out of those traps, figure out which traps they're falling into and get them out of them. It would be a good way that I would explain that.
Well, thank you for explaining that one. We obviously have managers out there listening to our episode. For those managers that are trying to do the best to help the critical thinker, what's one or two suggestions you could share with them to enable them to allow the critical thinker to reach their full potential?
Managers can look for people to keep improving systems that already work, who notice inconsistencies that others miss, and who ask better questions. So even if those questions are not asked in as polished a fashion as we may like, because neurointense people sometimes tend to be a little bit blunt or things don't come out as fully polished or filtered, nurture them by inviting their analysis early in the process. Pair them with mentors who appreciate precision rather than perceive it as a threat. So pair them with people who are emotionally regulated and who have patience and who are seeking to understand. Because everybody wants to be recognized and understood. So seek to understand. And as you mentioned, Will, in your Blue Talk recently, see what they are doing right versus what is going wrong.
Well, I love the fact that you mentioned pairing, right? Pair them with someone who could actually help them shine. Thank you for highlighting that. In your experience, what's a brain-based technique or mindset shift that can help people balance logic and empathy?
For mindset in corporate, know that everybody there is actually on the same team and just rowing differently. So I translate between brain types so that people have evidence of that. And then I teach quick neuro resets or biohacks, if you will, that can instantly bring more calm to the nervous system. Then I pair that with cognitive retraining. And this can regulate a person to be far more collaborative when applied, partly CMQ. And then the neurointegration training, it's not really about changing neurointense people. It's multidimensional. And it's about honoring this brain type so that logic and compassion can coexist, not only for themselves, but also for others.
Well, thank you for explaining that. For our listener out there who find themselves as deep thinker or critical thinker and often find that they couldn't fit into the workplace, what practical advice you have for them that allow them to better work with others?
Understand for them to understand that it's okay to be brilliant, but to be successful, you need other people to acknowledge that and to move you forward. So, brilliance becomes impact only when well received and embraced by others. Thus, you have to acknowledge others too. And everybody has their own brilliance. And while it may not be obvious to you what that is, it's your job to discover it. Organizations are made up of people,
Mm.
and you need others as much as they need you. So, share what you know. Express depth in digestible layers that other people can also receive well to embrace.
I like the fact that you said express them in digestible, right,
Mhm.
layers, because often when you talk to someone who's a critical thinker, at times their communication come up as complex, and they're one of the ways they're misunderstood because they said something and people look around like, what was that?
Yes.
And they didn't understand. And often human nature, when you don't understand, they kind of like start creating like this reaction that doesn't seem pleasant. And I think it's important, as you mentioned how manager could help them. It's important for people listening to this episode that if you work with someone who's a critical thinker, not only you have your manager flex to help that person, you as a team member can also take part in helping that person thrive, because the more they thrive, the more their ideas are incorporated, the more successful you will be as a team. It's the collective we, like you mentioned. Your brilliant idea is only as good as when it's accepted by your peers and community. So therefore, the critical thinker has its part to try to sort of adjust and flex, and often it's harder. But for the team, it might be easier for them to embrace. And for the leader, it's also good for them to learn how to make the most out, make give the critical thinker the opportunity to thrive and be successful in the role. For our listener out there today, if there's like two key message as far as helping critical thinker adapt and grow in the group, what are those two important points that you want them to learn?
Well, first off, to the employee, I would say that you are a minority, but you're not alone. So once you learn to reframe and regulate, your differences can work to your advantage. And having a different brain type can feel like speaking a different language. And there are some of us out there who do understand you. So don't alienate yourself. And once you understand your cognitive design and that of other people, you can frame your communication around it instead of constantly feeling misunderstood. And then, secondly, to the corporation, I encourage them to also see a bigger picture where the individual contributor isn't the problem, right? The communication style is. So, beyond culture and compassion, your company invested a lot in talent acquisition of this person. And if you let that top talent go quickly, the backfilling of that position is going to cost you even more. There is a solution. And we can learn to speak each other's language and to move forward better together.
And I want to go back to there is a solution, and Dr. Cleverly is the solution. I like that. This is her laying her expertise. This is her superpower.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out to her and connect with her because she can make your critical thinker shine and you would benefit from it. If my audience wants to reach out to you, someone wants to invite you to do a speaking event or a workshop or work with their organization, what's the best way to connect with you?
Listeners can find more about my work and about me at my website. There's also some free resources there. That's drcleverly.com. And they're welcome to connect with me directly by email. That's info@drcleverly.com or on LinkedIn and Facebook. They'll find me there under Blythe Cleverly and also Fork in the Road Strategy. So I'd be happy if they'd like to reach out.
I'll include all those links and information when we release this particular episode. Dr. Cleverly, I really want to thank you today to be a guest on my podcast. It's been an honor having you on my podcast. I heard your presentation at SFU in Vancouver. You did a phenomenal job. I was really impressed. So, for my audience, reach out to Dr. Cleverly, connect with her because I think she could help your organization achieve the next level. Thank you, Dr. Cleverly.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.